on again.
Everybody's gonna get a jacket, they're just not hearing it.
So after I hit the link for that, then I can just
You good?
that and then listen to.
Yeah, you should be able
Okay,
to.
so we're live and ready.
Live, ready, okay.
It looks like we still got a few minutes.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes.
We're live early.
Oh, That's okay.
Should
You
I?
guys, you students, you picked a good one to come to. It's not gonna be very long. So good choices. You wanna go? You can go. Are you sure? Please. So, you know.
Nobody's saying it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's okay. I feel like one might want to.
I just don't get how Mark he was like that.
We are. Just remind Jay that we're on.
Say that again.
Tell Mark that he was right here and I just.
He's selling a tractor in Iowa.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 days of driving.
Bless you. Hopefully it was not wet roads.
No, just 50 mile an hour crosswinds and an old truck.
Do you understand? He's just not there. Bad, you know, Yes, I would. You don't want to start. Yeah. You do something, do it right. Because that's what my dad always said.
I think we've got a good chance of recovering that.
Oh, I think you're right. Donation? Oh, yeah, because you're going to have it built and going. All right, good time. This is like those minutes where everybody's waiting to go out the ball. It's a shotgun start. Or it's the last tournament where all the kids are waiting for me to get all the scores up. And I tell them, get behind the curb, get away from me. No, they just come sit behind with me. No, they're good boys. No, Theodore would do it for me if I let him.
We're at 6 on mine.
All right, start. Let's start. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Hey, we're gonna start. We'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming. We are now in a meeting, so I would ask that you refrain from talking. We want to acknowledge that Jay Clark is on the phone. He's in Iowa, selling a tractor, but we're glad he's with us on the phone. So with that being said, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we have no signed in,
No signed in.
no speaking. Thank you. All right, is there any discussion for the consent agenda?
Probably worth just mentioning the board meeting, the special meeting.
We did,
Got that as a discussion item.
yep.
Um,
Any, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda with both special meeting and what we're gonna talk about.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's move on to discussion items. We have a PSAT report.
Yep, and Mrs. Goodson has asked that I present that tonight. We did have the sophomores take the PSAT. What you'll see here is the result for Middleton for the sophomores this year. What you'll notice is there's a comparison of our district with state, which is the public schools only, and then the state with all schools. So that would include any private entities, online schools that are not public, those kind of things would be included in that group. The US and US territories, as well as global. The PSAT is a test that's given all over the world. That is a test that is paid for by the state, so the district does not expend any of its specific funds to provide that test. As you can see from the score chart there, when you're looking at both benchmarks, both for math and our language skills, we are just a bit below the state average in terms of meeting both benchmarks. The state has with public schools only has 32% that are proficient in both. When you look globally, you're looking at that from 34% are hitting the mark on both language and math. If we roll up on that report, you'll see the reading and writing scores. First, you'll see from our district, we're at 66% that met the proficiency marks for reading and writing in the 10th grade. The state is at 65. The state for all schools, it's at 66. Then when you compare us to US and US territories, it's at 63, and global testers at 64. So we're outperforming those state public schools and US territories and global testers in the English and language arts. As you move up to the math, you'll see where our scores are at 32% for the district, at the state 33%, state with everybody 34, then you see US and US territories 35, and global testers at 36. So math is where, and this is consistent with our ISAT scores that where the focus of our attention has been going. To address that specifically, all of our schools this year have been in working with both Boise State. They have what's called the regional math centers that operates out of Boise State. They're providing our teachers with additional math instruction in terms of preparing them to teach students. But we also have been working through, last year we did a math adoption. And so with that, we started down a different process for how we were sharing and instructing within our math program. And that's been coming online as well. So what we're hoping to be able to use over this next year, now that we've had this new adoption and these trainings, we're hoping to see that bump up by spring. we're not way behind, but we should be hitting above the mark. And so that's where we want to be pushing to get ourselves above what the state, what the US and other territories, even across the world, are doing. The PSAT is limited in what the information that it provides to teachers in order to adjust instruction specifically to specific pieces of skills. So for instance, within a math score, you can't boil that down to look at a specific skill that our students aren't getting. And that's just a limitation of the information that comes back. And so what we use the PSAT for is that gauge against the other pieces that are going on. So that's kind of how we are looking on the PSAT. I did want to give a quick shout out to our students at the high school, for those that are familiar with our launch program within the state. The state completion rate for the application for the launch program is 24%. So 24% of the students across the state that were eligible completed the application. Within Middleton, 67% of our students completed that application and are looking for ways to utilize those launch dollars moving into whatever academic pathway or career pathway they are able to do that in. So that's actually that's a very significant look in terms of future planning for our students in terms of planning for post high school education.
So what do we do with these details, knowing that we've got, we're performing decently, but it doesn't give us a lot of like, hey, they're struggling in geometry or.
We lean back on, because it's consistent with what we've been seeing within the ISAT, we lean back on the details that we get from our ISAT and from our own internal, our iStation testing, our iReady testing that we do with our students. We can, because we see a consistent response, we're able to go back to those and dig in on the details where we're not hitting that mark. So that's where the focus is, and that's where our focus for our regional math centers is, on those areas that we've been scoring low in those testing situations that we have a little bit more data that comes back.
So how are teachers involved in, because 55% that are not yet approaching benchmarks as a 10th grader, right?
Right.
They're all.
According to the way that the PSAT measures, which again is geared towards the SAT, it's kind of a pre-SAT, which is designed to address whether a student is going to be successful in their first year of college.
Okay.
And so there's a narrow focus that the PSAT is looking at. Now, we can utilize that because it's consistently administered, not just within our state, but across the country and the world. And so it gives us a measuring stick. It just doesn't give us, this is where we need to address the problems. That's where we're going to be turning on our internal assessment to try to bring that up.
Can you explain the regional math centers?
I think Lisa might be able to give a little bit better description, if that's all right.
In terms of how they work.
Of how they work with our students.
Yeah.
So they're tied with Boise State University.
Right.
They're a grant-funded program. So they have coaches and there's directors and then coaches that go out and work with districts specifically. And really the goal, when you look at the state level data and you look at ISAT performance regarding math, that's kind of, that data in itself is what helped create the Regional Math Center.
Oh, okay.
The idea of helping improve those scores and getting more students proficient, especially with math.
Okay.
So we partner with the Regional Math Centers to do some math-specific professional development with our teachers. And so they come in really at all levels, so elementary, middle, and high school. And then we work through different variations of some professional development with them. Most recently, they've been working on some assessments. They've been working on utilizing some of the data from assessments and working through that. And then something called fact cycles. So they've been working through some assignments and helping create assignments within our curriculum that help support math development with our students too.
And another thing they did last year was they called them unit studies, where they would take specific units within the new curriculum and they would kind of break it down into its fundamental pieces so that teachers had a better understanding of how that unit was put together. And then they would share and compare where they'd seen successes in sharing that information with their students. And so it was a good way of having those peers come together. Like, for instance, at our elementary schools, it was the elementary teachers from the same grade from each elementary coming together and sharing what they'd seen as being successful within those specific units. And they did that, I think, 4 times last year, that they came in and guided that
Okay,
instruction.
I was hoping it was more than just high school level.
Yes,
all levels,
K
yeah.
through 12.
I would say it's similar, are you familiar with SESTA?
Mm-hmm.
So similar, offers similar service, just math geared.
Oh,
There's some
okay.
similarities between how
Okay.
they function, yep.
Any other comments on the PSAT or questions?
Not for me, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the crosswalk at Heights Elementary.
Okay, as you may be aware, the city has completed 9th Street, which runs along the north side of Heights Elementary property. Now, there's still more left to do, especially at the intersection, but it is now a functional street. Cars can move up and down. Prior to the completion of 9th Street, right behind, on the north side of the property, there was barriers that were placed in the road, and we had a fence and a gate that the gate is actually monitored by our office inside, so you have to buzz to get in the gate.
Nice.
But the neighborhood above utilized that access, as well as a number of parents would come to that space, drop their students off, and then turn around at the barriers and then head out. With the completion of 9th Street, now we have two-way traffic moving through that area. And it's not because it's kind of mid-street, it's not a place where the city would normally place a crosswalk. We have requested that the city do a study on what it would take to add a crosswalk, because if we were to add that crosswalk, it would be a responsibility of the district to do so. The documents that we've shared in there in the board packet go over what the costs would be for that, and what you would be looking at. We have to cut out the curb, create new curbs with the appropriate approaches, safety features as far as moving across the striping across the street. And then an additional cost would be any kind of signal. So a lighted signal that would,
Like the hawk light?
like, it wouldn't be the hawk light over the top,
Oh,
but it would be
okay.
that one that goes up
On
on
the
the side
side.
that you push a button and the lights will flash.
Oh, okay.
So for that entire cost, what you see for doing the crosswalk itself, that was bid out by the city. You see a total cost of $20,000 to make that crosswalk. And then to add the lights would be another $18,000 to have those lights added on both sides. And that's bids that are done out by the city, because it's a public roadway, the city would be responsible for the actual work, but we would be responsible for the payment of
I
that.
know, like 3 times.
And so what I would be requesting would be, because we do have a lot of students going across that. Right now, they're putting a cone in the road and they go out with their signs, but we don't actually have an actual crosswalk there. The students are going to be coming whether we do a crosswalk or not, and for the safety of our students, feel like it would be appropriate to do that. If we were going to fund that, the total cost would be $40,446. We would pay for that out of our plant facilities dollars. It wouldn't come from those school modernization funds, so there wouldn't be a change to that plan or anything like we went through in the last meeting.
Yeah.
We have the funds available, but that would be my recommendation to the board, is to make that add that crosswalk at that location.
So, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Susan.
I was just gonna ask, when they decided to put that through the city,
Mhm.
did they tell you or prepare you to, I mean, why did they not do?
Because
Crosswalk.
that's not, putting a
Natural
crosswalk
place for
mid-street,
one.
they are taking care of the crosswalks at the intersection, which would be the normal place that they would place that. But because we're making a request as essentially a
Oh, we're
citizen,
doing-
we're making the request, it's just not one that would naturally be there.
I
It's
see.
there because we have a gate and we chose to put a gate in that fence there.
I guess I'm not thinking at the right spot. It's not across cemetery.
No,
No.
it's
Cross
cross
nine.
nine on the
Okay,
backside of nine.
okay.
About half a block up.
Yeah.
What is the liability of that if, if we put that in or put part of it in or anything like that and start working on it and because it's midstream, a kid gets hit as opposed to.
If we create it based on the regulations, the same liability that would be in place for any other crosswalk. It wouldn't change. But right now, we actually have a greater liability because we have that gate and we're allowing parents to drop off there, which I'm gonna say as well, that really helps keep the
Cemetery.
lot down on cemetery because the parents can drop that off. If we were to close it, it would shut off that lot, close that gate and say, everybody has to go down here. It would close off the liability, but would it greatly increase both the student traffic near the intersection as well as parental vehicles as they're dropping and picking up their kids. So that's kind of what leads us to that recommendation. And in talking with the building principal, she felt like it would be important because, again, kids are coming down from that subdivision right there regardless of whether we put a crosswalk in or not. And when they're coming in, it's very likely that they're going to try and dart across because we won't be able to place, if we close up that gate, we wouldn't have somebody stationed saying, no, go down to the crosswalk because they're coming in off of our property. Any other questions? And in the action items, that would be an action that would need to be approached.
When we do that, we do the dollar amount.
Yeah, so I'll repeat that again, $40,446.03. And what you're authorizing me to do is to work with the city,
The cents.
3 cents. It was $40,446.03.
3 cents.
And then you're authorizing me to work with the city to create that
Okay.
crosswalk.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to the update from the special meeting.
Okay, and this was just meant as a way of informing our public. We did hold a special meeting last Monday. The reason for holding that meeting was to request the authorization of additional funds out of the modernization funds to make it so that the CTE building could be completed at a size that was going to meet our needs into the future. When we looked at those costs, it came down to a total cost of $362,344. That is of additional modernization funds. Important for something that we discussed was to make sure that it's clear that we're not taking funds from the elementary project to make that happen. This isn't something that's going to change the overall cost of any elementary project that we put forward. We included $87,000 roughly for our own contingency, which was beyond what the builder's contingency would be. And the board, the district has received a donation for all the steel for the building, which was a donation that amounted to $153,000. So between that and the 1.125 million that we received from the state, there was a significant amount that the district is not paying for. But I wanted to make sure that this was an opportunity to share that. with the general public in a regular meeting, since we had to do that in a special meeting in order to meet the timelines and try to still get that in by fall of next year.
And one of those things was that because of that timeline need and, we've got enough to get started, we still have a buffer of time to pursue other opportunities
For donations.
donations.
Correct. And we're going to continue to do
And
that.
would just take it out of where we're.
Yes, and if we don't utilize those funds for the contingency, or it comes in lower at any point, those funds just go right back to the modernization fund. They're not funds that are committed to, no matter what, to the builder. It's once it's done.
Thank you. Anything else, anybody? All right, let's move on to review of the board evaluation. I don't know how in depth you guys want me to go. I think basically we had a great work session, and some of the strong points is we realize we're a unified board. We collaborate pretty well together. We have a kind of a goal for ourselves to get out into the schools more and observe some of the processes that are happening, perhaps at teacher improvement or teacher professional development days. With that charge moving forward, we hope to schedule some dates next year so that we can, whoever can be there, and we can observe some things. And it might be nice to even include observing curriculum that we've adopted being used in a classroom. So overall, I think it was a good work session. I won't speak for the rest of my board. They can.
I think it was.
I think it's good. It's always good to examine yourself and to have some feedback and self-reflect so that we can be better than we were before. So with that being said, anybody else have anything they want to add?
I'd agree that it went very well, and it's a good reflection of our board and how we're all doing. So just to basically confirm what you guys have already said.
Well, thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. All right, with that being said, let's move on to discussion item E.
Contract with Zions
Science
Bank.
Bank, yep.
So in the past, we've used Piper Sandler as we've worked through our bonds. And as we've discussed, we're going to be looking at approaching our patrons with a bond issue in May of next year for a new elementary school. There's a lot of things we're working on to do that. But in the process, typically what we've received is financial guidance for the bond process and the legal wording and how much it will cost taxpayers. And we've relied in the past on Piper Sandler to provide that. Piper Sandler and Zions Bank often work together. And the way that they divide that work is that Zions Bank will work on the front end with financial advising to the district during the run up to the bond. And then if the bond passes, then when the actual sale of the bonds goes through, Piper Sandler takes that part of the deal. So we've been working with Piper Sandler and Zions Bank to establish how we want to move forward with this particular bond. And when we started into it, it was hard to work with Piper Sandler because part of what we'll use to build this school is some of the school modernization funds, and Piper Sandler was the primary bond seller for those funds, which created a little bit of a conflict for them if we were working with them to do financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
So as you remember, in the summer, we had Michael Keith come from Zions Bank, provide us with some initial estimates on how we could go forward with a bond issue for a new elementary school. And in that process, we felt like that coordination between Zions Bank and Piper Sandler from our district perspective worked well. And so what we're looking for is to formalize the agreement that we have with Zions Bank. We have an existing agreement with Piper Sandler. And so we'd like to formalize how we would be utilizing Zions Bank. Most of the contract, as you look through that, is perfunctory language that is just essentially saying that as a district, we're relying on Zions Bank to provide us with specific information leading up to the bond. But the payment for their services, if we go to page 12 on that agreement, I just want to make sure it's clear there on Schedule 1, if you'll scroll up just a little bit so I get that paragraph at the bottom. That second paragraph says, it is understood that Zion's fee will not be payable unless or until bonds are actually approved, issued, and sold, and the proceeds are available for the district's disposition. It's a part of the cost that goes into creating the bond. And so when they create a total cost for the district, they will include the cost for the financial guidance that we receive in that process. But it would not be something that would be charged to us if the bonds don't pass. So I wanted to make sure that that part of that agreement was clear as well. There's some outlines for elective services that we can ask for. Those would be things that if we went forward with, we would come to the board and ask for permission, essentially, to be able to do that, approval by the board.
And that'd be after.
That would, well, it might be in the middle of it, but it would be, before we utilize those services, we would come to you as a board and say, this is part of the contract. Do you authorize me to work with Zions Bank in that way? This is the coordination between Piper Sandler and Zions Bank is one that's used by multiple districts within the state as well as just here in the valley. CUNA is the first one that comes to mind. I know that they use Piper Sandler and Zions Bank together this way. And it makes it easier sometimes when the person who's giving you the financial advice is also the one that's benefiting by the sale of the bonds. It provides a little bit of they have to act in the two different roles, and it's easier if we can keep that separate.
I would agree.
Any questions?
It doesn't increase the cost of the service.
No, because we would have had to pay those services for Piper Sandler regardless. We're just having somebody else
Okay.
provide that.
Okay, good. Anything else, anybody? All right, let's move on to policy.
Okay, before we get into the first reading policy for the student-owned electronic communication devices, kind of wanted to make sure it was clear where this particular policy was coming from. If you're familiar, the state superintendent and governor about a month ago issued an executive order jointly to essentially recommending to school districts that they put a cell phone policy in place that protects as much of the instructional time as possible to be without cell phones. Now, as a district, we don't have a specific policy that governs all the schools. What we've leaned upon is handbooks. And so that each handbook for each school had a specific language of how they would incorporate or consequences that might be in place if a student were to use a cell phone inappropriately. What we're trying to do is to meet the executive order, which is not required. I want to make sure that it's clear that's not a requirement, but it is a recommendation from the State Department of Education and the governor to have those kind of things in place. Currently, what is in our handbooks meets those same criteria. It doesn't mean that we really need to necessarily change what our practice is. It's formalizing that within a policy. And so what we've done is we've taken the model policy, put that together put that together with our handbook instructions, and those handbook instructions, what we've made is the minimum of this policy hits the minimum of those handbooks. It allows for a school to be more stringent if they feel it's necessary for their instructional practice, but it doesn't require that. But it does essentially maintains the idea that at minimum, students should not be utilizing their cell phone during instructional time within the school. Passing times, lunch periods, those kind of things, certainly appropriate, but it gives a teacher the backing to be able to say, if you're utilizing the phone during my class, there can be a consequence that goes along with that. Our middle school goes a little bit further, requiring that students only have their phones out when they're outside of the building. They don't allow it during when they're inside any of the buildings. So passing times that they're outside, lunchtime, they can have those out, but they wouldn't have them out during the time. A lot of that came down to issues where students were taking film within restrooms and things like that, that obviously were not appropriate, and trying to put a stop to those kind of things. That's the general outline of that policy. Because it's a new policy, we have to go through 3 readings. So this will just be the first reading of multiple times. We've passed this to our building principals, but we'll also have our MEA take a look at it as well. Anything else?
I think just, the reason you're not seeing those typical redactions is because this is just all new. And so then as we go from a first reading to a second reading, we'll start adding in some of those redactions as well. So you'll start recognizing some of that as we move through the process with this one.
Makes sense.
So is there any discussion or talk about just aligning it with the student handbook, or
You can. There's 3 months worth, 3 readings worth
okay,
of whatever you feel you needs to be addressed. Like I said, this is an introductory.
okay, it's like what they would recommend. Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
And we've gone through and taken out the pieces that we knew didn't fit with what was in our handbook already, because we felt like what was in our handbook met the core of what the governor was asking. We didn't feel like we needed to make major adjustments to it.
Is that an executive order somewhere? Can I
Yes,
just-
that's, if you could just search Idaho
Gov.
Governor Executive Order cell phones, you'll get it.
And they call it the Phone Free Learning Act.
Thank you. Okay.
And then I'll just turn the floor over to Lisa for the remainder of our policies.
Do we want to move that one
Oh, yes, because it's
to a second? Is that your recommendation?
That is our recommendation.
All right, I would entertain a motion to move policy 3265 to a second reading.
I move that we move policy 3265, student-owned electronic communication devices, to a second reading.
No, second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next one.
So if you look at these next policies, this is our third and potentially final reading if you guys want to make that recommendation for all of these. So for all of these as a group, and then if there's specific questions on one individually you want me to go back to, just let me know. But as a group, there were no changes of those groups of policies from the second reading to the third reading. And so what you see in front of you is just the cleaned up version. So removed all the redaction, and this is what the final version would look like moving forward if we would like to move that into policy. Our recommendation would be, given that we've taken these through the 3 reading process, to move all of these into policy after tonight's meeting.
Very good. Anybody have any questions on those? Any of them? All right, I would entertain a motion. Don't forget there's some on the back. To move all those into policy.
I move that policy 1140, you want me to name the
Just the
policy?
number is appropriate.
Policy 2385, 2705, 3060, 5470, 7260, and 7402 be moved, or be approved,
Moved policy.
moved policy.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. They are moved. Let's move down to action items. I would entertain a motion to approve $40,446.03 to be used for a crosswalk and authorize Dr. Gee to work with the city of Middleton to make that come into fruition.
I second,
No, I can't.
I'll make a motion
okay, excuse me.
that we approve the crosswalk at Heights Elementary for the 40,446.03, and for Dr. Gee to work with the city to work in implementing
Thank
that
you.
crosswalk.
Or a second?
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
Right,
Aye.
Aye. All right, next one, I would entertain a motion to approve the Zions Bank contract.
Can you put an abstention on that last vote for me?
Yeah, oh, all those not in favor, say
Yeah,
aye.
yeah, just an abstention for me.
Oh, you abstain, okay. Thank you. That works, sorry. I didn't think you said anything, but
I didn't.
sometimes everybody always,
Usually I'm loud.
it's okay, next time kick me so I know.
That's all right.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve or deny Zions Bank contract.
I move that we approve the Zions Bank contract.
second,
All those in favor say aye.
aye,
aye.
Aye. Everyone said aye, right? All right, with that being said, we're adjourned. Students, make sure you come up and get your agenda signed by one of us. Thanks.